Welcome back, everyone. My name is Gyan Mabani, and I am the host of the Entrepreneurship Insights Podcast. I am so excited for the season three premiere, and I want to welcome Jeffrey to the show. He has dedicated his life to making the world a better place through engineering and real estate. And always a star student, he got exposure through his degree in Cal Poly in engineering, and then he interned at a few companies and went full time into consultant engineering at FM Global. A few years ago, he kickstarted his entrepreneurial journey at as a managing partner at Big Moment Capital. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jeff. It's a pleasure having you on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm honored for that was the best intro ever.
Thank you, thank you. So first off, just tell us your story. How'd you get started? Like as soon as you graduated from high school, like what's that journey all about?
Yeah, man. So I went to a four-year university called Cal Poly. It's in San Luis Obispo, California. So right there between Los Angeles and San Francisco along the coast. And I studied engineering because I didn't really know what else to do. But I'd always kind of had an idea. Like I've always loved like how things work, and I thought like engineering would be a good way to figure out like learn about how things work. And it really was. I loved my degree. I loved the time that I spent there and learning about engineering. And then towards the end of college, I read this book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, and kind of started the whole investing journey into real estate. And that was definitely the start of it.
Yeah, I remember Rich Dad Poor Dad. Like that's I guess one of the tenets of investing, entrepreneurship, all of that. Like because I feel people really look up to Robert Kiyosaki with all of his real estate ventures and all that. Yeah, so I think we can tie some more parallels into this as our conversation moves forward. But that that is wonderful. So before we get into like your background in engineering and all that, like what do you currently love as like what about that entrepreneurship journey or that entrepreneurship lifestyle you really love and look forward to every day?
I mean, it's a combination of lots of stuff, right? So when you go into the corporate world, there's a lot of bureaucracy and there's a lot of things that if you have an idea, maybe if you work at a company that's super entrepreneurial, like have you ever heard the term intrapreneur instead of entrepreneur?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Right. So, I mean, that's the idea where like if you become an entrepreneur within a company, I think that's the best case scenario, right? Because you get all the benefits of being an entrepreneur with all the safety of being an employee. So I think that's the gold standard, if you will. So, when I got into the corporate world, the company that I worked for was amazing. I have nothing but great things to say about it. It was just a little too rigid, right? So everything they did was very rigid. And now being outside the corporate world, I realized that kind of that's what I'm trying to do every day is make the set of rigidity that existed at this other company. So every day I'm like, oh man, like they had it figured out. They were doing great. But I think to answer your question, like I do love the ability to wake up every day and be like, okay, cool. What are we going to work on? How are we going to make this better? If there's anything that we want to do, we can just do it. We don't really have to get permission from our boss or, get approval from this committee and budgeting and all that. So if like we have an idea, we can just do it, which is, I think, one of the best parts of the whole thing.
Yeah. One part I want to touch on is controlling the chaos, right? Like you're like one of the great parts of entrepreneurship is you don't have to consult your boss, but one of the like not so hard parts about it is like you don't have to consult your boss. Like there is no one standing over you making sure that you're doing the right thing because there really isn't, right?
Right.
And so have your priorities changed since you've joined Big Moment Capital and just describe like how has your overall lifestyle shifted?
Truth be told, so I'm in real estate investing, right? And I think a
Yeah.
lot of real estate investors get into it for the passive income component, right? The idea of separating the time that you work with the money that you earn. And so, truth be told, a lot of the time, what we're trying to do is like my partner always challenged me. He's like, dude, how can you make sure that whatever you just did, you never have to do again? And like, I think that's an amazing question because every day, if you attack things with like, how can I do something? So this is the last time that I have to do it, right? You create a system around it such that other people are doing it for you. And then you can kind of just step back, right? And so that's, I think, the
Genius.
struggle that entrepreneurs face because it's like, well, shoot, if we're in this, we like controlling stuff, we like building things, right? And it can be really hard to say, you know what, I need to let other people do this. I need to step away and I need to just make sure everything's going. And, if there's a fire, we can put it out, but then ask the question, how can we make sure I never have to put out this fire again, right? Why did this fire come up? So lifestyle wise, I love the passive income part. I try to get outside every day and exercise and be active and, go on bike rides, go on runs and do it at times in the day or when I couldn't before, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely makes sense. I mean, like it does involve a little bit of freedom, and like you were saying, like with that entrepreneur sort of lifestyle, like you have the rigidity of the job, but you're also like exploring um exploring entrepreneurial ventures by yourself. I guess that also has a little bit to do with how your lifestyle sort of changed with that. And so, knowing what you do now, would you do anything differently? Maybe start earlier, or maybe like not even pick up engineering? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I really love having an engineering background. I think it helps to, when you're looking at something or trying to figure something out, just to have that foundation in like math, I think is really helpful. And especially in engineering, like you kind of learn the theory of stuff and then you go and apply it, right? So the theory is only good as the application is. And so I love kind of that's where the rubber meets the road for me. Like someone can say like a pitch about the newest and greatest investment opportunity ever. And if I can't really understand, like, well, how did you get from A to B? Like that doesn't make sense to me. And like, I don't think that's real. I see the theory, but I don't really agree with the application. It allows me to kind of filter through and be like, I think I'm going to pass. Like I'm out. Versus, if the fundamentals make sense, it feels really good to be able to have that foundation to kind of trust your math sense, if nothing else.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree, and it reminds me of a uh, one thing that Elon Musk said is like at his experience at Wharton, at the University of Pennsylvania, he liked physics more because it taught him the fundamentals and that sort of theory that he could later apply and do whatever he did with SpaceX and Neuralink. So like I guess yes, foundation like having a solid foundation of theories is really important, especially in the real estate world. So, do you miss anything about your previous jobs as a consultant engineer or your interning experiences?
I mean, yeah, like having a steady paycheck is really nice. you know,
Yeah.
I think a lot of times in entrepreneurship and business, everyone's like, "This is the greatest thing ever. There's nothing not good." I love it, and I think that that's true. But I know for me, there you have some down days. You have days where like, why am I doing this? This is dumb. I had such a good thing going, and you definitely have some of that regret. Do I miss it enough to go back? No. But there is something very nice about having a steady paycheck coming in that you don't really have to worry about it. As long as you do your job well, that comes in. So when you go out on your own, you don't have that. And then it's easy to forget about the other stuff that costs money, right? It's not just your salary, it's your health insurance, it's your cell phone bill, it's your internet, it's all this stuff that before didn't seem as big of an expense, but man, when it's on you to pay for, you definitely feel it.
Yeah. Earlier they were just benefits, and now they're like, oh, like these small costs of $50 to slowly start piling on. And now it's like thousands. Like, oh God. Like, I mean, yeah. So I guess that sort of involves a little bit of not only time management, but like you get a better sense of how your money is spent when when it really matters, right? And I'm sure that you must have that experience with like budgeting and all that sort of costs. So when did you make that shift in from engineering to real estate? And was it like a rigid shift, or was it like you just flowed smoothly into doing whatever you do now? Like how like what was it like?
It was more of a fluid shift, I'd say.
Mhm.
I was working as an engineer, and my partner was also working as a statistician, doing
Mhm.
like clinical programming. And so we both had STEM jobs, and we both, had W-2 jobs, and we were doing real estate on the side, and just buying long-term rentals in the Midwest, basically as often as we could afford a down payment. So we would just save up a down payment, go and buy property, and then start saving again. So banking as much of our paycheck as possible. And I think the thing that kind of gets not talked about as much is not necessarily trying to earn more, but trying to save more. Like that is, I think a savings rate is much more important than your income level, especially as like, you're getting out of college and you're doing entry level jobs, or out of high school and doing entry level jobs.
Yeah,
You can't necessarily control your income, but you can absolutely control your savings.
exactly. Yeah,
And so
like
that I think is a much better thing to focus on, because if you can save more money, obviously you have more cash to go do stuff with.
yeah, exactly. And it's like one of the like principles of macroeconomics, right? Where when you're given money, you can either spend or save it. And depending on how much you save, like if you keep it as a percentage, like I'm gonna say 50%, right? No matter if you get $100 this month or $1,000, you're gonna save 50% of that, right? And then that number is
Hmm.
slowly gonna like exponentially grow as your income grows, right? So
Hmm.
I guess thinking of things in terms of percentages rather than like specific dollar amounts has proved to be way more beneficial in the long term. So
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. I love that.
yeah, so like you were talking about down payments and all that. Um, how do you really get started? Like, do you like I've heard there's so many different ways to get into real estate investing, like with wholesaling and whatnot. Like, and especially with the down payment, like you're paying like the minimum, so you have to eventually, what do you call it, pay that whole property off, right? In a foreseeable future. So how did you get started with like how did you find that passion? Like just say like, okay, I want to do this. This is my like this is a duty I'm setting for myself, essentially.
Yeah, man, it's an awesome question. So going back to at the end of college, I read that book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and like I was saying, with like the fundamentals and kind of understanding things, to me, that book just made sense. And so for any of your listeners that haven't read Rich Dad Poor Dad, it's an amazing book. It does a really good job of laying a foundation for kind of just an investment theory, and it talks about assets versus liabilities, and the basic premise is an asset is anything that puts money into your pocket on a monthly basis, and liabilities are anything that takes money out of your pocket on a monthly basis. So, most people say like, oh, my house is my greatest asset. It could be, but not if it's costing you money for your mortgage every month, right?
Exactly.
Which the majority of people is. So when I read that, I was like, holy smokes, a light bulb went off, and I was like, that makes sense. So I just want to start buying assets. And in the book, he talks about real estate a lot. And again, like I didn't necessarily develop a passion for real estate. Real estate just made the most sense to me. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I can understand like people live in a house, they pay rent. Cool. That makes sense. Like I've done that before. I've been, I'm a
Exactly.
tenant. That makes sense to me. So from there, I was like, okay, cool. Now I got to figure out how to run numbers, right? And figure out how to figure out which houses I should buy. Um, and from there, it was just a whole bunch of learning and podcasts and books and making Excel sheets and stuff.
Yeah,
And once you kind of get going, you're just like, oh man, this is fun. You start analyzing deals. You're like, oh, this is cool.
exactly. So you were talking about assets versus liabilities, right? At some point, like I'm assuming that when you invest in real estate, there is a point where you reach where the money coming in is more than the money coming out. Like can you give us like a okay, let me rephrase. So say you buy is like invest in real estate now. Could you give us a timeline as to like when you actually start making a profit on that deal?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a great question. So let's do. If it's cool, I'll go through the first deal I did.
Yeah, sure, sure,
We'll
for
use
sure.
some real numbers. Okay, cool. So it was a duplex in the Midwest, and the total cost of the duplex was 65 grand. So you need to generally put 20% down for an investment property. So I put down 12 grand, and then my mortgage, so my monthly cost to own that property was just about 500 bucks. The rent, and it was a duplex, right? So there were two sides. So each side of the duplex paid $700 in rent.
$700.
So in theory, on a monthly basis, my cash outlay, I'd be spending 500 to own it, and then maybe add 100 or 200 for maintenance or utilities or whatever it is. So call it, I'm spending 700,
Yeah,
right? That's cash going out, and I'm getting 1,400 in rent coming in. So in
exactly.
theory, you should be getting $700 a month,
Yeah, but you still
right?
don't
In
own the property
profit.
completely.
You still own the property. Well, you own the property. You have a loan on the property,
Yeah, okay.
right? Because you've invested 12 grand as your down payment.
So don't you pay the bank that the rest 48K or whatever is remaining?
over this over the span of 30 years.
30 years. Okay.
So so every month for 30 years, my mortgage was about $500,
500.
right? So every month I'm spending 500. I pay that to the bank,
Okay.
right? And the 200 more for maintenance or utilities, whatever it is. And then every month, in theory, renters are bringing in $1,400. So even though I'm paying a mortgage, right, in theory, I should be like cash flowing, like making an additional $700 on top of my expenses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes clear sense, right? Like first you pay out 500 to the bank, then 100, 200 for utilities, but you're getting in 1,400, and so all that evens out to like a profit of 700 each month, correct? Around that.
Correct. So, you're correct in that what about your down payment? You've still spent your down payment. So that's technically money you have into the deal. And in most real estate transactions, have you ever heard of like a return on investment
Yeah,
or cash on cash return, right?
yeah, I have.
So to calculate a cash on cash return, you take, okay, let's say you're cash flowing $700 every month, and returns are generally done on an annual basis. So if it's $700 a month, let me get my calculator. If it's $700 a month times 12 months a year,
Yeah,
right? What does that give us? That gives
8,400.
us $8,400 a year,
Yeah,
right? And so now if we say, okay, so we're making $8,400 a year, well, how much money have we put into the deal? Like, what is our return, right? So we're gonna do 8,400 divided by our 12 grand that we put down as a down payment, right? And so that gives us, okay, that's a 70% return, but that's not actually real because it never works out that good. But that's just an example.
yeah,
It's
makes sense because you're after a year you're still running in a loss of I think what is it 3,600 because
right.
you've down paid 12,000 and you've only made 8,400. So like I guess in 2 years you would have um I guess made a profit, correct?
Right. You would have no money in the deal anymore, right?
Yeah.
Now that's just on cash flow, right? In real estate, you can buy for cash flow and you can also buy for equity, right? So that's assuming that in those 2 years, the duplex, it cost 65 grand originally, it didn't go up in value,
Oh, okay.
right? Because if it goes up in value, then you can calculate that in your return, right? That becomes your equity. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Okay, yeah. So then at the end of the year, let's say it's 70K, so then I add an extra 5K to my 8,400.
Right, right. It would be a little tricky because you're not really seeing that 5 grand as cash. It's just
Okay.
equity that you have. Does
Unrealized
that make
return.
sense? Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that does make sense. And then so what you do at Big Moment now is you just do it on a bigger level, correct? Like you invest in bigger properties, make like bigger amounts of
Yep.
cash flow and all that.
Exactly. So, we still do some duplexes and triplexes and quads. Now
Yeah.
we primarily focus on short-term rentals.
Okay.
So, properties that are on Airbnb and VRBO and Booking.
Makes sense.
And we started a management company to manage those bookings or those short-term rentals. Excuse me.
Short-term rentals. So you were talking about like how you started with your first deal. And I've heard that like you can hire property managers and like people just to do the work for you. Like, were you doing the work or did you hire someone else in the first deal? And when did you actually decide that, hey, I want to hire someone to handle this for me? This is getting too much.
That's a great question. So I've always had property managers.
Okay.
So I was living in the Bay Area of California at the time,
Hmm.
and the property was in the Midwest. And I've actually never seen a property that I own, like in person ever. So I was relying pretty heavily on property managers
Hmm.
to let me know like what the condition of the property was. And I think that's another really helpful, it can be helpful is people think like, oh man, I have to invest where I live. It's not necessarily true. If you live in an expensive area, you can absolutely invest in a less expensive area.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I brought the property management team on early on before I even bought the property. And you can call 5 or 6, just Google property managers, Cleveland, Ohio, or whatever market you want to invest in, and start calling them and just have a conversation, chat with them. If you get along with them on the phone, that's a good sign. If you don't get along with them on the phone, you probably don't want to work with them
Yeah.
because you're going to be on the phone with them.
Managing partnerships is like getting married, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Um, so, once you have a property management company that you like and, at least over the phone, and you've gotten some references and you've checked them out and, other clients have liked them,
Mhm.
then tell them what you're looking for. Say, hey, I'm looking to buy a cash flowing multifamily house under 120 grand. This is my budget. This is, with minimal rehab. And then you're like, okay. And they'll start sending you stuff. Or, they can recommend a real estate agent to send you deals. But the important part there is because you're not on the ground, before the real estate agent sends you the deal, have them vet it with the property manager. Because you're going to see the deal and you're like, I don't know if this is a good area or not good area.
Yeah.
But if they send it to the property manager first, the property manager's job is to know, what kind of area is it? Is it a good area? Is it a not good area? Is it going to need a lot of work? Stuff like that.
Like especially like the environment or like I like I've heard of experiences where um the people living like the people who are supposed to give you rent don't give you rent, and it's completely fine because of whatever jurisdiction is happening in the state. So like how do you deal with that? Like how do you make sure that, let's say, that 1400 doesn't come in and it's just cash out, cash out, cash out? Like what do you do in that scenario?
Yeah, that's the hard part, right? So you got to make sure that when you're running numbers, you don't just tell yourself the best case scenario. You
Exactly.
don't assume that every month you're going to get 1,400 in. So when I run numbers, I'm super conservative. I like to be like, okay, what is the worst case scenario, so that I know, right? I can be prepared
Mhm.
mentally and emotionally and spiritually. Um,
Yeah.
so for example, maybe you say, okay, if you expect 1,400 to come in every month, assume when you're running numbers, it's only going to come in 10 out of 12 months,
10 out of 12.
right?
Okay.
And then you can kind of look and see, okay, cool. If it only comes in 10 out of 12 months, you know, do I need more cash as a reserve, right? To be able to pay stuff out, right?
Exactly.
And so like, I always like having 12 months. That's super conservative. And it's not like, that's not a very well agreed upon number, but in a perfect world, having 12 months of mortgage payments, just
Hmm.
sitting in cash, ready to go,
Okay.
right? So I knew that, okay, if tenants don't pay rent for a year, not a cent, I'm good. No worries. We've got cash to pay for it. It's all good. So that comes back to the savings rate, right? So that you can only do that if you've been able to save up enough cash in
Mhm.
order to have that reserve, right? And let's say you've saved 20 grand, not spending all 20 grand on a down payment, right? Maybe only spending 10 or 12 or 15 and having 5 in reserve.
Yeah, yeah. That that definitely does make sense, right? Just having that like sort of safety net for yourself, right? Like how we talk about
Yep.
people having that emergency fund, like where they have 3 months of full-time income just sitting there, ready just to
Yep.
be liquidated. So yeah, that does make sense, and that does provide you like a sort of, like I said, a safety net, just to, like if I have to leave right now, I'll just go. So I've heard of things like crowdfunding as well. I think there's an app called Fundrise out there that's been
Mm-hmm.
pretty popular as of late. But it, could you give us the pros and cons of crowdfunding versus like actually going out and buying individual properties and managing those? Like
Yeah, for sure.
have you had experiences with like, or just lay it out for us?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a great question. So, and obviously this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't really know what I'm talking about. But I think with a crowdfunding platform like Fundrise, the pros are it is entirely passive, right? It's basically buying a stock,
Okay.
right? When you go and buy a share of Tesla, you don't really have any say in what Tesla does as a company, right?
Yeah,
They don't give you Elon's number and you can call him up and be like, hey, let's get that Cybertruck going. You have a share
exactly.
of Tesla. You're an owner, but you're not you don't have any say. So when you invest in a crowdfunding platform, it's very similar. You are a part owner, and you're what's known as a limited partner. So your liability is limited to the
Exactly.
amount of dollars that you put in, which is really nice. And that can be a pro or a con, because with limited liability comes limited upside, right? So
Exactly.
it's considered it's the safest way to invest in larger real estate deals.
Hmm.
Um, so the benefits are, it's super passive. You don't really have to do anything.
Yeah,
That can also be a con. If you want to learn about real estate, you don't really get a chance to learn that much by being an LP, a limited partner, because you don't have that phone to Elon, right?
exactly.
You don't have that say in what goes on. You don't decide when they're going to sell, when they're going to buy, what they're going to buy,
Exactly.
right? So conversely, when you go and buy your own property, your upside is not really limited, but neither is your liability,
Exactly. Yeah. So some more
right? So
liability,
if you,
more reward, kind of like that.
right. So it's, it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for passive investments, right? If you're looking to put your money somewhere that is very safe and will give you some returns and you don't really have to think about it, crowdfunding can be a great way to do that. You've heard real estate's a good idea. You want to have some of your portfolio in stocks, some in bonds, some in real estate.
Exactly.
Crowdfunding can be a great way to put some money into real estate. If you're like, oh, I'm ready to go. I want to learn everything. I want to buy a property. I want to manage it. Then I want to manage 10 and 12 and 50 and 100 and then buy everything. Might be better to start with, buying one property and seeing how that goes. You're going to learn a ton when you buy a property yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Like experiences reap more rewards in that in that manner.
If the rewards are something that you want, right?
Yeah, but by
Because
rewards, I meant like, what do you call it? More learning experience, like that's not, I don't want to say superficial, but like non-tangible reward, essentially.
for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, what is big moment capital, and like what does it do? I mean, other than invest in like what specific properties does it invest in? Like, what does it look to provide, essentially?
Yeah, for sure. So Big Moment Capital is the LLC that me and my partner founded when we were buying real estate in the Midwest. We were doing it individually. So
Okay.
we were just both buying a property in the Midwest, and we realized we were like, oh, dang, once you buy the property, you're basically at zero and you got to start saving money again for the next down payment,
Yeah.
right? You're like, oh, crap, now I'm out of money. So we decided, we were like, oh man, if we partner up, we can buy the same type of property in half the time, right? Because we're both putting money into this pot,
Exactly.
right? So that's what we started doing. We just started buying properties together, and we did it in an LLC because we heard that that's the good way to, make it safe and make it, if we needed to split ways, it's a good way to limit liability. Again, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. Consult one before you do anything. So, we started buying properties together in that LLC. And as we were doing that, we wouldn't shut up about what we were doing. And so we had friends and family come to us and say, hey, can we invest with you? And at first we were like, okay. So we started going down the rabbit hole of, what does that look like? How do we take care
Mhm.
of, how do we protect everyone legally? How do we protect everyone from liability? How do we make sure it's fair? How do we make sure it's a good return? Like all these things. And we settled on doing, it's called a real estate fund. So it's for non-accredited investors. And, it's all investors that we have personal relationships with. And, we can pool everyone's money together and go and buy some property. So that's what we did. So all of the investments that we've done have either been in the Midwest, that first market that we started in, and those are all long-term rentals. So, very cut and dry. Tenants sign a lease, they pay rent every month, and it's long-term tenants.
Yeah.
And then the other market that we're in is the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, which are all the short-term rentals. So those are properties that are on Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.
Okay.
And that's the one that I told you we started a management company to manage those ourselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to join Big Moment right now. Like it's like I love it. So like when you were talking about pooling all the funds and then just invest in whatever properties, do you consult the buyer? Do you consult the investors like if they wanted to invest in a specific one, or do you just do it by yourself? And also to add on, like how do you split the profits? Like do you do it by percentage of how much money you put in initially? Like how do you do that? Like what's that looking like?
All phenomenal questions. So the first one is no, we don't ask them. So the idea is that no one there are people who don't know about real estate, have identified real estate as a good investment, but don't want to necessarily learn all there is to know about real estate. So
Okay.
they're the types of people who wouldn't want to buy their own property, right? And so instead, what they're saying is, hey, we're gonna give you our money, and we're gonna pool all that money together, and now we're gonna go buy something that none of us individually could buy ourselves. Right? We're gonna buy something bigger than we otherwise could buy just individually. So we'll identify the market, we'll identify the building, we'll do the due diligence, we do all the work, and we put a little bit of money in ourselves, and then we go and buy the property. But to answer your question, no, they don't really get to decide once they decide to invest with us. We can show them our track record. This is our past performance. This is the types of deals that we've done in the past, but they don't necessarily have say in deals going forward.
So it's just like a
And
thing with the bank, like where you give the money to your financial advisor and he does whatever he does with portfolios, right? You don't decide like
basic,
which.
yes and no. This is all within real estate, right? So we're not going to take people's money and then go invest in the stock market because we're
Yeah.
not stock market experts, right? So it's all into real estate and all into stuff that we've done before and have, knowledge about.
Yeah.
And your second question was how are returns given, right?
Yeah.
So let's say we raise 100 grand and we get 10 people to give us $10,000 each, right? So everyone has a 10% ownership in this fund.
Exactly.
Well, now, let's say we have $1,000 of profit to distribute. We're going to give out that profit proportionally to everyone's ownership stake. So because everyone owns 10%, everyone gets 10% of the distributable profits. So in this case, it'd be $100.
Okay. So like if someone invested 50% or 50 grand of the 100 grand, and then everyone else invested 10%, the dude would get $500 and then everyone else would get 100. Okay, makes sense.
Exactly.
That way you keep it like more equitable.
And so that's called, this is a fancy term for proportional. It's called pro rata.
Pro rata.
Yeah, it's very confusing because they don't just say proportional. Like in all the legal paperwork, it says, oh, pro rata. Just say proportional. Just speak English. You have to make it more confusing.
Exactly. So, you were saying about Airbnbs and VRBOs. Like, are they like I've been in Airbnbs before, but like only for like a few days, like 1 to 3 days. Like you were talking short term. Are you talking about like 6 months to a year, or is that too long, or is this like
No, like the ones that you've stayed at, just a couple days at a time.
okay, yeah, because like now thinking back, right? Like you're a big name in the market to manage all these companies, to manage all these properties. It's like, okay, I'm paying someone who's paying another person, and then who's distributing the profits among like 15 other people. So like it's remarkable to think about like how we as consumers just and how that money that we pay just sort of splits like rapidly. So
Yeah, totally.
yeah, so you were talking about like how your engineering provides like a theoretical approach to whatever you invest in. Um, like as of recent, how have you found that useful in let's say in your latest deal or latest few deals?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing is just, being able to look at a spreadsheet and, you know, do I believe that this is going to be true?
Hmm.
Because, a spreadsheet will only give you as good of information, like the outputs of the spreadsheet are only going to be as good as the inputs you give it, right?
Exactly.
So I think the engineering degree helps to be able to be like, okay, how good are the inputs that are going into this thing? How good are they? Are they real? Are they biased? Are they not accurate? And, are we looking at things with rose colored glasses? And if so, we're going to get rose colored glasses as output. So I think the engineering degree really helps to just be able like, okay, is this real? Let's not, just be super analytical about it. Try to figure out yes or no.
Exactly. Yeah, makes sense. And I guess that sort of leads into one more question. Um, one other question I had, like, how do you decide which properties to invest in? Like, is it a little bit of like, okay, do I have that financial power to invest, or it's just like a gut feeling, like I just feel like it, I just put money here, or
No, so it comes back to, analyzing deals, right? So if you only analyze one deal, right, in your entire life, you're not going to have anything to compare that to. So you're going to get the output and you're going to see, okay, I have no idea if this is good, not good, like where on the spectrum this falls in terms of do I want to buy this? But if you've analyzed thousands, oh my God, you're going to be so good and have such a strong comparison. Be like, okay, well, this one fits in kind of here, and you'll have a much better basis to compare. So, we've analyzed a ton of deals. So when we're deciding to buy something, it's a combination of a number of things. One, do you like the market? Two, does it cash flow on a monthly basis?
yeah,
Right? And three, how sure are we that it's going to cash flow? Double checking our inputs and assumptions for the spreadsheet. And from there, assuming that we do have the means to buy it, we'll usually put in some offers.
okay, makes sense. And so to wrap up our conversation, what advice do you have for teens thinking of entering the engineering or real estate market? Because like me as an like I'm really interested in this field, like and I want to get started as soon as I turn 18. Like what advice would you have for someone like me?
Hmm. I think, I've been really lucky that I've always enjoyed reading. But I think one of the best things to do is, just start reading, pick up books on topics that you find interesting. It doesn't even have to be about real estate. Books on entrepreneurs and people who have done this way before, because, you can go to the library and get it for free. So it doesn't even cost anything, but you can get this knowledge of these greats who have come before us. And you literally get an insight into their brains and learn, what they're thinking and what they were thinking at the time and how they did it. And it's so amazing. So I think for anyone, I mean, this is advice to myself too. Just read more. Get out there and find something you're interested in, and get reading on it.
Exactly. And like and I found that like many books are available as PDFs online. Like you can just download them for free. Just if you do
Yeah,
like two or 3 minutes of Google search, and like you can literally find anything that you're interested in. And I guess that's the internet at our disposal. And so one like general overarching question is like what advice do you have for teens just looking to take advantage of their passion? Whether it may be engineering, medicine, entrepreneurship, like anything. Like, what advice do you have?
same thing. If you're lucky enough to find a passion, at a young age, don't be afraid to go for it. And be okay with passions changing. Because passions that you have when you're 12 are going to be different than when you're 16, and different when you're 20, and different when you're 24, and etc. So, don't be like shiny object syndrome. Don't just be like, oh, this and then that and then this. Like pick something and put your mind to it. But then if you decide to change your mind, that's totally fine.
Yeah, it's
It
like
doesn't
just
have to be so rigid.
yeah, like be obsessed with it enough that you finish whatever you're doing till completion, and then just move on.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I like what you're saying with be obsessed, but also at the same time, don't forget to be a human. You know, like live life, enjoy life, be with your family, be the best sibling you can be the best, son or daughter you can be the best friend you can be. And I think that kind of helps everybody around you tend to elevate, right? Because if you're only doing this one thing over and over and over, it's like, all right, well, dude, you might miss it,
You're gonna be a machine and whatever you do, like that's good, but like you're also gonna have no personality, no friends,
Right,
no family, like,
right.
Yeah. So anything else that you'd just like to any last words that you'd like to end the conversation, like just you really want viewers to, just take away?
Oh, yeah, one more. Um, be very selective with who you choose as a mentor. And a follow up to that is definitely have a mentor or multiple. Um, and this is something that, I struggle with and I'm working on a ton. And, just the idea of like finding someone who I can look at that is who I want to be like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And so for me, if that person's not holistically the type of person I want to be, I usually won't, look at their advice. But if there's someone who is, super family oriented and down to earth and not flashy and hardworking and all the things that I want to be, then I can look at them and be like, all right, cool. Like I want to, work for you. I want to learn from you.
Yeah, exactly. Like mentors shouldn't be chosen on how much net worth they have. They should be like because like that net worth means more than just how much money you have. It's like the people you spend your time around. It's like how you're influenced by your ideals and all beliefs, traditions, so on. So
Right. And I mean,
yeah.
look, if your only goal is to have the highest net worth you can,
Mhm.
then you should look for mentors with high net worths. But
Yeah,
for me, like I don't really care about that. That's not why I'm doing what I do. So
exactly.
to me, if someone's like, "Oh, look at this Ferrari and all these nice cars," I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
You look silly. No offense, if any of your listeners are into Ferraris.
Yeah, it's down to a personal preference anyways. Like it's how you want to like it's like because the mentor is who you like when you're choosing one, you're like, I want to be like you soon in the future. Like and if this dude has flaunts his wealth and all that, then if that's who you want to be, like you go to you, right? It's
Right,
uh,
100%.
so any last thoughts?
No, man, I think you're doing an amazing job. You're crushing it.
Thank
You
you very
said
much.
you're graduating high school, right?
Yeah, in June.
Dude, that's nuts. You're like 17,000 times further ahead than like I didn't even know what a podcast was in high school. So you're crushing it, man. Wishing you
Thank
the
you
best
very
of
much.
luck.
Thank you very much. And so I guess I'd like to thank you, Jeff, for joining us on the podcast, and thank you to our viewers and listeners for joining us for the season 3 premiere. I'm very excited as to what I have in store for all of you. And that's it. Have a wonderful day and good afternoon, good night.